statements. So things like problem solving, critical thinking, the sort of notions of engagement and ethical responsibility, a lot of professional requirements around that link very carefully, clearly then to things like communication skills that are required for certain professions as they come out when graduates leave the university, or for that matter if they're going to continue on to further study. So these sort of generic skills, if you like, were the sorts of things that my own research and other people's research have indicated that cause challenges for academics in trying to work out how to assess them. So things like problem solving or critical thinking, people often associated with the difficulties of assessment. And people like Phil Race say we're still quite good at assessing things that aren't that important. And these things that are really important challenge us when we're really, especially if we're looking at things like students' abilities to solve very unstructured problems. And I guess I particularly like a Mary Burns example where she talks about town planning graduates. So in a nutshell, if we have all of our graduates coming out and they can only solve the kind of case study problems that we've set them in a very structured context, where they know what all the parameters are, then when they go out into the workplace, they will almost never have those perfectly structured problems to solve. So you'll have the town planners going out and they'll go into an environment where they don't know what all the regulations are, or there's a change in some of the height restrictions on a certain area, or they need to know where to find information and how to integrate that with the information they already have. So these are the sorts of things that, in some ways, the graduate capabilities push at Macquarie meant we were trying to set up assessment strategies to help students be able to demonstrate their learning around these graduate capability areas. Now, if I just go back to the previous slide, there are just a couple of other areas that are worth mentioning in this context. We also, like lots of other institutions, have this push towards work-integrated learning as part of that whole recognition of the importance of authentic learning content and authentic assessment activities. And at the same time, we have huge numbers of students that have work that they do. And so encouraging them to be able to think about applying their frameworks that they're looking at in their university course into the work that they do in their part-time or almost full-time job, then that's a great way of making that learning very authentic. So when we did our iLecture study, I was involved in a study across 4 universities, an ALTC-funded study looking at the impact of web lecture recording technologies like iLecture. And around that same time, we were looking at some of the results of studies into student work patterns. And we know that almost 80% of our students in the 4 unis that we looked at, which were Murdoch, Macquarie, Newcastle and Flinders, almost 80% of the students involved in the study worked 15 hours a week or something as an average, even if they were enrolled as full-time students. So there's this very strong evidence that tells us that our students are time poor. And so if they can have some frameworks to help them think about their learning, it doesn't work in all work contexts, obviously. But there was an indication from Macquarie and from this new policy direction that we could try and encourage work-integrated learning where possible. And you can see from that reference that also came from the AQF. Now, sustainability was the third area that was all happening just in this, as I said before, a series of fortunate events in some ways. We had sustainability. So one of our white papers on the new curriculum review program we were going through talked about the notion of participation units. So participation and community engagement is an area that all of our students were required to do some kind of work. Maybe it's a Volunteers Abroad sort of program or some kind of participation to help students integrate their knowledge. And that was at the same time being discussed as these new changes, for instance, introducing capstones. So I guess that's where my true interest became evident, because I really see that a lot of people can view all of these as just a series of layers of complexity, if you like. And to me, a capstone environment provides a great chance to do all of these things at once. If we have a program-wide approach, we can tick lots of boxes by thinking about lots of these different things we have to address in our new types of curriculum. So I can see Jeff says, yes, we often assess what's easy to assess. Yeah, that's right. So I thought I might pause there and see whether, well, I'll just put this Stevenson quote on, and that's the sort of, again, this notion of, oh, I did fix up that little experience leaking down to the bottom. I'm not sure why that happens. Sometimes when it goes into these virtual classrooms, the format turns out to be slightly different. So I'm sorry about that. But I thought I'd pause at this point and see whether other people have a context where they've got all these apparently conflicting needs and drivers influencing the curriculum, and see whether that's the sort of thing that other people have experienced. So over to you.
Just a reminder, everyone, that if you would like to talk, you can click the little hands up button, or if no one's talking, you can just take the mic.
So does anyone, I just need to scroll down to make sure there are no hands. Sure.
Sorry, I'm not familiar with the edit. Is it okay if I say something, Margot? Janice.
Hi, Janice. Yes, I can hear you.
What you just said, I related to very strongly, because I was writing an application recently for an ALTC grant and just trying to make sense of all the things that people talk about when they talk about, you know, work-ready graduates, reading the literature, the numbers of studies, particularly from industry or driven by industry, about what do we want for graduates. You just get like overwhelmed with how does the school fit together and what are the main issues here, and a lot of the terms are overlapping as well, things like generic skills and graduate capabilities. You know, you're not talking about different things, you're talking about that kind of thing. So that's just a little comment about it. But trying to make sense of it.
Yes, thank you, Janice. That is so common in my discussions with people across campus here. It's just a feeling almost of being overwhelmed by layers of all this complexity. So yes, I'm sure you're not alone. You know, it's really because we have all these different things to think about. And I thought it was a great chance to say, okay, well, if we think about this very strategically, how can we try and integrate a few of them? Now I'll hand over to Jeff, who has his hand up as well, and thank you for the tick and for your comments.
Okay, thanks for that. Yes, I think it's often a really interesting point about curriculum design and about how we actually put all the different influences into our actual design of the curriculum. And by the design of the curriculum, I'm meaning the learning activities and then the assessment tasks that we get students to do. And it's a very complex issue, and I think a lot of teaching staff do struggle with that, about how they can be fair to both their discipline area and what's the expectations from their colleagues in their discipline area, as well as all these layers that are put on top of that, and then having to put that into a coherent package that actually makes sense to the students, and then also to be able to then set assessment tasks that are actually supposed to align with all those things as well. So I think, yes, I agree with you, Margot, it's a very complex issue, but it's something that we all have to deal with, and presumably it's one of the things that especially development centres have to work with people on to be able to help them to be able to make sense of all those complexities and how they can put all those together.